Okay, well, welcome back again. And here we are on the finishing up on the lecture of IVF and also talking about the natural family planning, all right? Natural family planning, which will be the healthy alternative to the other two big hot issues that we have been talking about, contraception and in vitro fertilization. Beginning always with a little prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and enkindle in us the fire of your divine love. Amen. All right, so I had left behind, all right, from this little list here, PIGD I covered already, pre-implantation diagnosis. I still need to talk about surrogate motherhood and the snowflake babies, which I mentioned in passing. And then distinguish IVF, in vitro fertilization, from artificial insemination, okay? Even though the word insemination can be loosely used in the in vitro process, technically it's not really correct because they're two separate techniques. And one is assisting procreation, but the other one is actually substituting procreation, all right? So it makes a big difference in the ethical analysis. So just to review PIGD, you know what is involved here. It's before the implantation itself. So it's pre-zygotic, not sorry, it's post-zygotic, but it's pre-implantation when genetic testing can be done on the morula, the human morula, okay? So there's also straight up prenatal diagnosis, and that's why I'm calling this PIGD. I need to correct that on all the slides. This one is PIGD, but you also run across another one that is called just prenatal. All right, and that's called PGD, or you just sometimes see it PD, right? Which is different because this one in prenatal diagnosis, the embryo is already growing in the womb of the mother, and it can be done at various stages of development. In here, things are like amniocentesis or chorionic villi sampling, right? Those are types of prenatal diagnosis. It's more general, but it's different. All right, let me move forward now with surrogate motherhood, because this is another aspect that happens sometimes with in vitro fertilization. In other words, that the mother, the couple is not only doing that external fertilization process, right, in the lab, in vitro, but also for a number of reasons, the woman doesn't even want to be pregnant or can't get pregnant, right? And therefore, they will essentially rent a womb, all right? It's surrogate motherhood. And again, it's not illegal to hire a woman to gestate a baby, to carry a baby to term in her womb, all right? So we can think of some possible health issue is a woman who has maybe some health clinical condition with her reproductive tract, even though she can produce eggs, but she cannot gestate. And so that couple will then hire a third party, another woman, who obviously needs to be healthy, right, to carry the pregnancy, and then give up the baby at the end of the pregnancy, right? Again, it's not illegal, and therefore it's part of the services that the IVF industry offers, because obviously they don't want to miss any customer or any client, and they try to solve all the possible problems. This has raised ethical issues, again, on several counts. For example, this woman who is renting her womb, you know, essentially she's like a human incubator, right? And how ethical is that? Because we know that psychologically and even spiritually, there's a bonding that happens between the mother and child. And this third party, this other woman, first of all, she's not the biological mother, right? But she's a gestational mother. So that already represents that this baby will have two mothers. She'll have a biological mother and a gestational mother. Give me a minute. I'm going to pause for a moment because Kareem came and I need to turn on the video here, the projector. So give me a moment. So I was saying that when we consider just at the human level, all right, the human anomalies that this surrogate motherhood introduces, for example, from the perspective of the biological mother of the child, she's not gestating, so therefore she's not bonding with that child. There could be a certain sense of distancing herself from the child who is biological hers. Conversely, the other woman, the woman who is just renting out her womb, is it fair to demand from her not to bond with that child who is growing in her womb, because immediately upon birth, she's going to give up that child? Okay, so, and these are issues that really cannot be measured beforehand, because each person is going to be different. So even if this surrogate mother in her mind says, I'm not going to bond, I'm not going to bond, who knows what's actually going to happen in real life, okay? And therefore, there are injustices built in there into this system. Not to mention, of course, the child, as I was saying, this child now has two mothers, one biological or genetic mother and another a gestational mother. And so what happens is that these couples that are undergoing IVF, typically, they don't tell the children any of this, right? They don't tell them to begin with that they are IVF children or anything like that, because everyone is afraid of traumatizing that child. And in fact, it has happened. The ones who do know, typically, you know, they are traumatized. They have a lot of questions about themselves, whether they really want it or not, how come. And if they start digging about the details of the IVF procedure, they realize that they were actually manufactured in a lab, and that they possibly have other siblings who are either frozen in cryopreservation or were aborted because of the procedure. They start feeling guilty about the fact that they're alive and their siblings are dead, and their death, their life, his life or her life was the cause of the other's death. So you can begin to see all the psychological and spiritual aspects that this brings in, you know, just on the human side of things, okay? So we can basically claim, periodically you'll see me making reference to natural rights, which are before what we call positive rights. Positive rights are the rights that are given to us by law, by civil law, designed by legislature, which could be at the most local level. For example, the legislature in a county, you know, the board of administrators of the county, all the way to through the state level, the state legislature, all the way up to the national level with, in our case, Congress. These are people who design, they craft the laws, right? Which hopefully are ethical and fair laws. But those are human laws. Before human laws are these natural laws or natural rights that we have. For example, a natural right to breathe, okay, and to exist and so forth. And it has been said many, many times by many regimes that positive laws are good in the sense that they protect natural rights and natural law. And it makes a lot of sense. So we have a natural right to be gestated by our biological mother, by the mother who is giving us her genetics, all right? Okay, so let me move forward. I do want to mention briefly about the Snowflake project, because this has come up. Now, it's been well, quite a few years, I would say maybe about 10 years or so, maybe a little bit more, that real pro-life people were being concerned about this accumulation of human embryos that were being stored cryopreserved, right? And so they started thinking about it and says, well, how about we consider the human embryo, you know, as a preborn baby that can also be adopted, just like we adopt born babies, okay? How about these are preborn babies that for some reason their parents walked away or can't have them anymore? So how about we try rescuing them since the technology is already available and they have already been created, manufactured, and they're just sitting there. By the way, I also want to mention these human embryos, when they're cryopreserved, are they dead or alive? And you realize that those are two mutually exclusive categories, right? Whether you're dead or alive. And sometimes we talk, well, he's half dead or she's almost dead or barely alive, but that's a figure of speech. Really, rigorously, strictly speaking, we're either dead or alive. In other words, we're metabolizing in an organized fashion, or we're no longer metabolizing and disorder has kicked in, right? And there is a breakdown of the metabolism of the tissues and organs of our body, which understandably, it's going to be gradual because by the time we even are born and beyond, we already have trillions of cells and they don't all die at the same time, right? So that's another issue bringing in, going forward into the end of life issues. At any rate, back to the original question, you have to understand that what is your sense? Are these frozen human embryos, which are essentially crystallized? There is no metabolism going on there, okay? They're not growing. Are they dead or alive? What do you think? It's a real question. I'll just.
I would say alive because the molecular machinery is still it's prepared to continue functioning given resuscitation.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, before I pass a judgment or give my thoughts, anyone else want to chime in? Dead or alive, frozen, and it doesn't have to be human. Any embryo. Okay. Right, it's alive. It's kind of analogous to a seed. You know, it's a seed dead or alive. Well, we don't know until we plant it, right? A seed could be dead and not go forth. But if we plant a seed and it grows, then obviously it was alive because there is no literal resurrection here. They're not coming back to life after being dead, organically speaking. All right. So yes, it's what we call suspended animation, which is a technical term. All right. But it's important, and this also illustrates a philosophical point that we talk about potency and action. So these human beings are human beings, and they have the potential for further growth. All right, they've done some growth already because they're at the blastocyst stage, and they have potential for further growth. But they're actually human beings. All right, and they are in what is called suspended animation. That can be done with lower animals. You can take insects, for example, live insects, and put them in a jar and put them in your freezer, and they will curl up into a kind of a crystallized fashion. Then you can take out a few hours later, you know, they're rock solid, hard. You can take them out of the freezer, put them on the counter, and let them thaw passively, just at room temperature. And you'll see that at least some of them will start crawling around, if not many or all. I used to do that when I was in college, about your age, with bees. First, you got to take off the sting, of course. Anyway, it can be done. It can be done with smaller animals, typically, especially insects that tend to have less water in their bodies. And that exoskeleton, I guess, protects them a little bit from the breaking up of cells. But yeah, suspended animation, all right? But definitely they're alive. And during suspended animation could be for decades. Every now and then you hear in the news some woman who went back into the tank. One time there was a grandmother who gestated the child of her daughter, because the daughter, I think she got cancer. The daughter got cancer. The daughter, who was an adult, who had undergone in vitro and had stored embryos. Then she had cancer of the reproductive tract and lost her reproductive tract. But then her mother, in other words, the grandmother of the child, right, gestated that child. When the child was born, she gave the child to her mother. So now this child has, it turns out that her grandmother is also her gestational mother. You know, what's going on? I mean, it's getting very bizarre, no? Who's considering the children, the child's perspective? Are you really my grandmother, or are you my mother, my second mother? See? So we gotta, at some point, we gotta focus on the perspective of this kid's looking out to the rest of humanity. So the Snowflake Project is trying to rescue these babies because there are many, many couples in the US and throughout the world who really cannot get pregnant, and they do want to have their children, but they can either not afford IVF or they don't want to do IVF, and it's very difficult to find babies actually in the US and North America, for example, and Europe to adopt. So this is an alternative, okay? But it's not without its complications, because it's very different from adopting a born baby. These embryos still have to be gestated and so forth, so it's got its own challenges too. But anyway, it is a possibility, and I have the Vatican reference here because when this came up, then the Vatican studied it and put out a document, and it was in 2008, right? Called here Dignitas Personae, on the dignity of the human person, and it's kind of a follow-up to Humanae Vitae. Remember I talked to you about Humanae Vitae in 1987, 10 years after In Vitro. Humanae Vitae was the document that spoke about, Donum Vitae, right? And so this is a follow-up to that document about 30 years later, bringing it up to date, all right? And it goes short of saying no, absolutely no to snowflakes embryo adoption. And therefore, there is still a window of opportunity there, while, at least from the Catholic perspective, while the Vatican doesn't make an official declaration either way, then theologians who are studying these issues can go either way with it, you know, yes or no. But it's still an open question, but there are certain limitations to it. One that would be obvious, that it should be a couple who is a stable marriage of a man and a woman who really want to provide a home to that child, and not single people or anything like that, or same-sex marriages, again, because of the other dynamics of potential injustice to the child who is expecting. You know, we have to assume that children expect to have a normal father and mother for their parents. Okay, I want to finish this other thing with artificial insemination, also known as AI, the other AI, not the technological AI, but the biological AI. It's not artificial intelligence, it's artificial insemination, all right? And as the word says, what is happening here is the artificial aspect of it is the insemination itself, but the fertilization occurs naturally, occurs within the ampulla. And so here, basically, the sperm is being assisted into arriving at the egg, all right? But the fertilization itself is in vivo. So artificial insemination is not really in vitro fertilization, because the fertilization is in vivo within the woman's body. One possible clinical justification for this is if the man is producing a low number of sperm, what is known as low sperm count, all right? Below that 100 million level that I talked about, when it's significantly lower than that, could be 50 or less, 50 million, is already considered borderline fertilization capacity, all right? Not to mention if they're producing even less than that. And so this will enhance simply the density of sperm to hopefully one will be able to reach the egg. But the egg itself is still in the ampulla waiting for that fertilization, all right? So you can see why I'm saying that this is assisting fertilization, but the fertilization itself is still in vivo. Therefore, it's not substituting fertilization, which is what IVF does by doing it in the lab, by doing the fertilization in the lab, all right? So a critical distinction between assisting or substituting with regards to a vital process, which is the process of fertilization. I will use this way of thinking later also when we talk about end-of-life issues with regards to vital organs, assisting or substituting vital organs to help us get a grip on the determination of death, all right? So assisting or substituting vital organs will make it's a philosophical distinction, it's an existential distinction, and therefore it's also a bioethical distinction. Okay, let me move forward. Any other questions on IVF?
Professor, well, I'm guessing you'll cover the ethical aspect, like you'll focus on the ethical aspect later in the presentation.
Of which? Of
artificial, like,
well, AI?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, no, yeah, thank you for reminding me because I only explained the biology of it, basically. That's what I wanted to say. That's what I meant to say by assisting versus substituting, okay? So because it is not substituting fertilization, because fertilization is still occurring in vivo, all right, then it may be justified. Artificial insemination may be justified ethically, at least from the principal perspective, because it is simply helping the sperm to achieve its goal, all right? It's helping the sperm, but it's not substituting the actual process, the vital process of fertilization. Yeah. So at least from the principal perspective, it may be justified. But again, I say that with caution because certain provisions have to be in place, meaning that it should be a couple who is married stably and has made that life commitment, etc. The same general conditions that apply for other just normal fertilization. Okay, so thanks for bringing that up. Let's go into NFP then, because I mean, you can think of it, for the past 2 weeks, we've been talking about basically no to all of these technological and clinical interventions on human procreation. But then we still have to ask the question, well, is there any alternative? All right. I go back to that original hypothetical thing, let's say with contraception. If the couple is not supposed to contracept, does that mean that they're expected to have a baby every 9 months or every 10 months, right? Obviously not. So the alternative, which I've been mentioning back and forth, is what we call natural family planning, right? Natural family planning. So we're going to get into it. And again, this has 2 levels, as always. In bioethics, first, we're going to look at the biological aspect of natural family planning, and then at the ethical evaluation of that. All right, so the first thing I want to say about natural family planning is that it is not the rhythm, all right? And it is not following menstruation, because the rhythm, what is known as the rhythm, is based on the symptom of menstruation, all right? Which is typically a very obvious symptom of ovulation, but it's a post-ovulation symptom, all right? It's a post-ovulation symptom. What I mean by this is that ovulation has already happened. By the time menstruation is occurring, that essentially is discarding an over-ripened egg. And therefore, the key moment for fertilization, which is ovulation, the ovulation window of 24 hours has passed already. And that's why it's not really a very accurate method. Also because different women will be regular or irregular, even it will change with the years, all right? And therefore, it's not really, menstruation is not really to be trusted as a symptom to predict or to determine ovulation. It may work for some women who are very regular, but that's not always the case. Whereas natural family planning, NFP, actually focuses on pre-ovulatory symptoms, all right? there are about 10 symptoms, at least 10 symptoms from the woman's body that are pointing toward ovulation, or actually these symptoms may actually be occurring during ovulation. As we understand, biologically, ovulation is really the only time that a woman can get pregnant, because if there's no egg, if there's no mature egg there to be fertilized, then there's not going to be any fertilization, right? So the whole issue of NFP is to focus on the symptoms of ovulation so that the woman may be able to determine when she is ovulating, all right? Like I say, there are at least about 10 of these symptoms. 3 are considered primary and 7 are secondary. So obviously the primary symptoms are the ones that have the most informative value. Okay. All right, so let's look at the 3 primary symptoms, which are known as the body temperature, the activity of the cervix, and the cervical mucus. So the basal body temperature, also known as BBT, you know, we have a lot of acronyms in science and in medicine. BBT is, we all have a basal body temperature, right? Which is that 98.7 or 97.8. It's one of those two. What is it? Anybody remember the basal body temperature? I know it's 37 degrees in centigrade.
I was going to say 37 Celsius, but
yeah,
that's how I remember it.
Okay. So, well, we can always ask. Okay, let's see if it gives us. Come on, just answer the question.
Very clear answers.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
98.6. Okay, well, that's why it's kind of a little range there. It's a range, 97 to 98. Okay. So let's look at these 3 in a moment, but just for the sake of completion, I'm going to list here also the other 7 as secondary. Mittelschmerz, which means middle pain in German, and I'll tell you why that middle pain comes about. Spotting, the swollen vagina or vulva because of accumulation of water retention, increased libido, breast tenderness also associated with eventual nursing of the child if there is pregnancy, general feeling of bloating, again, retaining water, and finally, ferning, which I'll talk about ferning at the end. These are secondary, okay? So the ones to trust the most really are the primary symptoms. Okay, so and these are some protocols and methods that promote natural family planning. So these are references that you can look up online. They all have websites with for free with plenty of charts and documentation to explain the process in detail. All right, let's look at, oh, sorry, where's, I don't have a slide for BBT. Well, then let me go back here for a moment. So we all have a basal body temperature, right? So 97, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. And what happens is that during ovulation, there's a slight increase in the temperature of the body, slight increase of the woman, obviously. And it could be anywhere between 0.5 to 1 degree Fahrenheit. But now there are thermometers that are accurate enough to measure that. They go down even to centesimal, all right? So there are digital thermometers today that measure the BBT quite accurately, even down to a centesimal. So certainly 0.5 to 1 degree of difference can be measured. And there is that little spike during ovulation, just before ovulation. The problem with this one is that a woman can also have, well, 2 things. First of all, once we become active during the day, our BBT is going to fluctuate a little bit back and forth. If we're in the sun, it's going to be higher. If we're in this room, it's going to be lower, much lower, you know, and so on and so forth. And also as we activate, because it's driven by metabolism, right? So if our metabolism activates more and it's burning more ATPs and so forth, then the BBT is going to rise slightly. And therefore, it's going to give a fluctuated reading, number one. Number two, also, infections rise the temperature, right? It's one of the effects of an infection, even if it's a local infection. It could be, for example, a UTI or something like that for the woman. That could rise the temperature slightly and give a false peak, thinking that she may be ovulating, whereas actually it could be a low-grade infection that's going on, all right? Even though the peaks are actually a little different in shape, but that's the reality. And so of these three primary symptoms, because it's associated directly with the ovulation, the least trusted one is the BPT, all right? The other two are much more accurate, and that's why I go into other two a little more detail. So let's look at the activity of the cervix. The cervix is a muscle that it is between the vagina and the uterus. These are all smooth muscles, all right? And it's a circular muscle, similar to the mouth, which is also they're called sphincter muscles, right? The anus is also a sphincter muscle. The muscles at the top and at the bottom of the stomach, for example, those are sphincters, all right? So these are smooth muscle that respond to hormonal stimulation. And therefore, the cervix, this muscle, has what we call an activity, all right? And it is, that activity is coordinated or driven by the hormonal level, especially estrogen and progesterone levels that vary during the woman's cycle. So that when the woman is ovulating, that's the fertile time, all right? Then that cervix is high, is called high, and it is soft and moist and open, as can be seen here in the photograph, right? And kind of toward the center of the base of the base of the cervix, of the uterus, the fundus. Whereas when the woman is not ovulating, all right, that cervix drops down. It drops because it becomes tight, closed. You can see here how it's closed, all right? It's low, and it forms like a little cone, and it's firm. It's called firm. And it also even displaces off center to boot. It displaces off center, okay? So that we're all adults here in class and we're talking biologically and clinically, so that in the infertile time, that cervix, the OS, which means opening, doesn't actually match up with the head of the penis, but whereas when she's fertile, it does. So to enhance the passage of semen into the uterus, okay? So biologically, organically, it's designed that way during the fertile time to enhance passage of sperm, whereas in the infertile time to block the passage of sperm or any other object, which by definition, sperm is a foreign object in the female body, right? And so it blocks, it forms a block there. All right, so that's known as the activity of the cervix, and it can be detected by a self-examination of the woman. Again, hygiene is of vital importance here because typically the woman will use her longer finger, which is the middle finger, wash her hands well, very well first, before that, and then just self-examine, and with the tip of the index of the middle finger, touch and see what is the activity of the cervix. Is it high and moist and soft, or is it low and firm and dry? All right? And that will be the definition or the type of symptoms that she's looking for. All right, the third, which is the most accurate of all the three primary symptoms, is what is known as the quality of the cervical mucus, which again changes biochemically. So here we are down to the biochemical level, and that's why it's the most accurate one. It changes biochemically from the infertile time to the fertile time, all right? And this is what happens. During the fertile time, let's say, it's the easiest one to explain first, that cervical mucus is elastic, transparent, and moist, fluid, all right, wet. And whereas in the infertile time, the cervical mucus is dry, tacky, it's called tacky. It doesn't stretch out, and the stretching could be up to an inch, which is detectable easily just by visualizing it, all right? So in the fertile time, it's opaque and tacky and on the dry side. So again, the cervical mucus that indicates fertility is similar to an egg white, but before cooking, just the clear, transparent egg white, all right? That kind of consistency. And the reason for the change is a biochemical change that again is hormonally driven and pH driven. What happens is that this mucus is very rich and complex. It's a polymucosaccharide, all right, that they're long polymers. And during the fertile time, those long polymers are stretched out and they form kind of highways. So the cervical mucus serves several purposes. It's indicated here with a little white streaming. Cervical mucus, I mentioned already, it provides nutrition for the sperm to allow it to last up to 5 days in the reproductive tract, the female tract, all right? Whereas normal sperm only lasts for about 1 day. It is also a lubricant. The cervical mucus serves as a lubricant, but also as a highway, if you will, a microscopic highway for the sperm to travel through those long polymers of polysaccharides, all right? That's during the fertile time, and that's why it looks like that, wet and stringy and transparent. However, during the infertile time, precisely because of the change in hormonal levels in the female body and the change in pH that brings about, that same mucus, those same polysaccharides now twist and turn like a mesh, and they form like a mesh, typical, similar to, you know, fishing line that gets all tangled, the nylon line that gets entangled and forms this wad and mesh, something like that at the microscopic level. And the end result of that is that it actually forms a plug. So the same mucus that during the fertile time was a highway for the sperm, now is a roadblock during the infertile time. Because it's not just for the sperm, it's for everything else, because the only thing that belongs inside a female reproductive tract during the ovulation is sperm, right? But during the infertile time, nothing belongs in there because it's really an entry into the internal organs. And so think of bacteria, viruses, fungus, spores, anything else doesn't belong there. So this plug helps to maintain, you know, to discourage infections, all right? So that's the cervical mucus, and like I mentioned, is the most accurate of the three symptoms because now here you're down to the biochemical level. And so with that self-exam, typically for women who are following NFP, what they would do when they do the self-exam of the cervical activity, also they will pick up a little bit of the mucus with, again, with the middle finger. And that's what's being shown here, and then proceed to look visually what is the quality of that mucus, all right? If it's stretchy and stringy and so forth and wet, or if it's tacky, etc. Hello? All right, so these are the three primary symptoms, and they're very accurate when taken together, but like I say, mostly the mucus itself, and when it's followed correctly, it can give up to 98, 99% accuracy, which is what the best contraceptives do, but without any chemicals involved, all right? So there it is. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the ethical analysis in a moment, but let me see here. For the sake of completion, I'll come back to this slide. Let me look at the 7. Oh, yes, I don't have, yeah, I have to go back here for a moment. Okay, So just for the sake of completion, let me stop for a moment, stop. Any questions about the primary symptoms, comments, anything? Okay, so it does take that self-examination, to be taken seriously and confidentially, but it can be done, it's there. And it's certainly very different from just observing menstruation, right? Because you see, these are all pre-ovulatory symptoms or during the actual ovulation, and therefore they're much more accurate in determining the ovulation itself. All right. Just for the sake of completion, let me cover these other 7. I mentioned Mittelschmerz. Well, Mittelschmerz, as I said, is middle pain in German, and this is why that middle pain comes about. First of all, this is not the cramps of menstruation again. That's a different pain. This actually occurs 2 weeks displaced from that, from the cramps that some women feel with menstruation. It's different, all right? This one actually occurs halfway between menstruations. So again, on average, every ovulation, one ovulation every month, once a month, and it's a lunar cycle of 28 days, so 4 weeks. But for the sake of simplicity, people just use a regular calendar of the months of the year. At any rate, during ovulation, as is illustrated here in this little diagram, all right, the rupture of the follicle from the ovary. Remember how I mentioned that the infundibulum, this little hand structure here, like a little glove, it's not attached directly to the ovary, all right? It's not attached, it's actually just close, it's hovering over, it's really just holding on, if you will, to the ovary, all right? But there is a space there of a few millimeters. And so what happens is when the woman is not ovulating, that space is a little wider because the organs are a little more relaxed. Remember, these are smooth muscle, right? And so it's a little more relaxed. But during ovulation, again, driven hormonally, that infundibulum, that end of the fallopian tube, actually moves in close to the ovary, all right? And that little motion, even if it's just a few millimeters, causes a sensation in some women inside the pelvic region, all right? And it causes this little pain, which is typically on one side. Well, the side that is causing the pain is the ovary that is ovulating. And so that's the middle pain. The Germans just refer to it because it's in the pelvic region, and it's the movement, literally the movement of the arm close to the ovary to catch that egg, if you will, once it ruptures from the follicle, all right? So that's the Mittelschmerz. Beyond that, all right, there can be some spotting that happens, but it's not the same spotting, obviously, as menstruation, because in menstruation, normally, on average, there's a larger flow of blood, and typically within that flow of blood, there will be a little tiny dot, which is the egg, the overripened egg, typically microscopic, all right, but it's in there. The spotting is much smaller, and some women have it, some women don't have it. That is true for all of these symptoms, all right? And keep in mind that these are, I'm speaking on average, right? And so on average, some women, most women will feel most of the symptoms most of the time, okay? But any one of the symptoms can be felt rather strongly to none at all. There's a range for each one of them. And it may also vary according to the age of the woman and so forth. So many, many factors come into play here. Again, the swollen reproductive organs simply because of retaining water, right? Which is also associated with the general bloating. And biologically, because those organs are preparing for the possibility of intercourse. And so this is all part of the biological process of the body preparing for possible intercourse if there is ovulation, right? The libido is the same argument, but at the psychological level, which we know that hormones have an impact not only on our physiology, but also on our psychology. So we have a rush of adrenaline, you know, that's going to elicit certain moods or state of mind, okay? The same if there's a an increase in estrogen in the woman or an increase in testosterone in the man, well, that also has an impact on the pleasure centers of the brain to desire that intercourse more. All right, it's there. We, again, always make the argument here that an increased libido doesn't mean that the person has to have intercourse necessarily, because we have the human will, in contrast with the animals that are just living by instinct. Breast tenderness also associated with the increased estrogen, all right? Bloating, retention of water in general for the body, and finally ferning. So let's just look at ferning for a moment. Let's see if yeah. Because ferning, I just find it interesting that the increase in estrogen is systemic, meaning that it's throughout the whole body of the woman, all right? Including her saliva. So it's that, generalized, that rush or overflow, if you will, of estrogen and progestins, that it even reaches the salivary glands on the base of the throat. And so even the saliva will have a slightly larger amount of estrogen during ovulation, again, on average, all right? And that can also be visualized through this process of ferning. So ferning, there are these little tiny ferning microscopes, little tubes, because when that saliva dries, it crystallizes, okay? And so here are some patterns. For example, here's one. These are, when that estrogen crystallizes, right? It forms what is not a ferning pattern. What is a ferning pattern? Well, this comes from ferns.
Yeah, like the actual plant, right?
Yeah, it's the actual plant of fern, right? Which looks like it's the pattern, right? So it's not that women are growing ferns now all of a sudden through their throats. Please, let's interpret the thing. It has the pattern of the front of the fern, all right? So here's an actual fern, and it has that pattern. It's a crystallization pattern, actually, which is a fairly common crystallization pattern. It's just called ferning. So what happens is, there are these little tubes, let me see, ferning kit. That can be bought online, all right? There they are, all kinds of them. And they have this little tube that is a lens. And it comes also with glass slides and whatnot, so that what the woman would do would take some saliva and put it on a slide, a glass slide, and let it dry, just at room temperature, let it dry by itself. And then with the lens, little tube, like a little microscope, actually it's like a little miniature telescope, really. She would try to detect the pattern, okay? Not too trustworthy, but I guess if it's done over cycle and cycle and cycle, eventually the woman will become familiar with that. Here's another one, it's got the actual tubes. See, there it is. All right, it's like a little miniature telescope, really. So anyway, this is available commercially, and it's all in a repetitive cycle, right? To be able to use this accurately. But like I say, it's a secondary symptom, and there's going to be a range. Some women may produce more estrogen than others in their saliva, and so on and so forth. So not to be trusted as much. In general, what we can say about the secondary symptoms, they tend to confirm the primary symptoms or not, all right? But for a woman or a couple who is using NFP, they would definitely go with the primary symptoms first. And then if they want to confirm, to get more confirmation, they would simply, she would simply notice, yes, I'm getting at least some of the other symptoms are occurring. You know, so it's like a confirmation that, yes, she's ovulating, all right? But if the secondary symptoms not occur, then go by the primary symptoms for sure. And of the primary, of the three primary, they're actually in reverse order of priority. The most accurate one is the mucus. second is the activity, and the least accurate, the BPT. Any questions on the biological, medical, clinical side before we look at the ethical evaluation? All right, then we can still ask the question, well, how about the husband? Because this is still all on the woman, right? She's still, even though she's not taking chemicals or going through surgery or doing anything like that, it's still the kind of the burden is on the woman to detect, to become familiar or to detect her time of ovulation. So with regards to the man, all of this is theory for sure, but the point is that a respectful husband, one who is really concerned and in tune with his wife, then they would have a very good communication and make the decision in common of when to have, when not to have the children, but it's a common decision. So the bottom line is that he has to exercise discipline because, again, we know that in contrast to women, we don't cycle. We are producing testosterone all the time from puberty forward. So the natural background desire, you would say it's always there, all right? Doesn't mean that we need to act on that desire. It means that the human will needs to be engaged so that this is truly a human act and not just, a selfish act, all right? So ultimately, it's going to take that couple to what can be considered sacrificial love, which is the most responsible, mature type of love. Our parents did that when they were raising us, right? There was sacrificial love involved there in raising us, and so on and so forth. So it's consistent with human behavior. We are capable of this type of generosity and activity. If we look at the bioethical evaluation as such, we see as a means and as an end, right? So as a means, there's no separation between the unitive and the procreative dimensions. So at least from the principal perspective, the means can be justified. It is respectful of human nature, etc. And so it is justifiable as a means, okay? And then as an end, I want to pick up on something I had talked about earlier in contraception, that for well-grounded reasons or for serious reasons, a couple may certainly make the decision to avoid children at that particular time of the marriage, and even indefinitely. Obviously, that decision should be revisited periodically, right? Because conditions do change. At some point, they did graduate and so forth, and they were able to save up some more money, et cetera, et cetera. So that decision really needs to be reviewed. Everything points toward the couple being very honest and transparent with each other. Okay, and so there really it takes away the manipulative potential that contraception and IVF can insert and introduce into the relationship. What else do I have? Right, okay, so I'm saying that this is the healthy alternative for the previous two, either contraception, avoiding conception, or IVF, avoiding the intimacy of the couple, because it is respectful of human nature, the way things are supposed to be in nature, right? And we have the capacity for dialoguing, for reasoning it out and coming to a common understanding of it. The contraceptive mentality, I already spoke about earlier. We've seen that it's taken a toll. Did I send you that article by email, a link to what is happening now? This was, again, I picked it up on the BBC about populations going into negative growth. Did I send that link? Because I forget.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, all right.
Yes, you did.
All right, all right. Take the time to read it. I mean, this is strictly from, you're not going to see God mentioned there or religion or anything. You know, this is strictly from a secular, a very secular news media like the BBC, picking up on reports from nations, several nations, their annual report on population growth, specifically the US and China, you know, and just making a comment. In fact, just today I saw another news article that the government of China now is allowing Chinese women to have 3 children instead of 1. Whoops. How's that for backpedaling? We call it backpedaling, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't even stop at 2. They went to 3. What is that telling you? They're desperate. The Chinese government is desperate because they don't know going forward. And these demographics are long-term, right? Inexorably, the Chinese population is getting older. And who's coming in? Nobody's coming in to support that older population. We're talking about 1/4 of the world's, 1/5 of the world's population, all right, in one country. So they got so alarmed that now they're saying, okay, you can have 3.
Yeah, I mentioned Japan and
Yes.
They have an especially sensitive case because I'm not sure how they rank in that issue, but I know they're among the more well-known cases of
Negative
the
growth.
generational advancement being smaller. And I don't know if maybe part of that was also the fact that in proportion to the size of their country, their population is actually massive.
Yes, yes. So we talk about population density, right?
Yeah.
It's true that you bring it up, important because Japan is somewhat different. First of all, it's still a wealthy nation in general, all right? So they may have a lot of provision for social security, say, of the elderly, but also they have this issue. They have thousands of islands in the archipelago of Japan. It may be 10,000 islands, something like that, but most of those islands don't even have fresh water. They're small. They don't have fresh water, so they're uninhabited. The main islands of Japan, the ones that are inhabited, have generally high population density. And so their issue is more of a territorial issue. China, in contrast, has a huge landmass, right?
Right.
And so from that perspective, it's different. But yes, definitely. In general, we can say that all of the industrialized nations are going toward negative population growth. And many of them are there already. And the ones that are not, it's just a question of time. Again, because, you know, it's the number of individuals, it's a discrete number. It's an actual number of individuals in any country. And unless more are being born, then that population is necessarily getting older. So those are population demographics that are long-term. Even if babies come in today, by the time they start working and being productive in the economy, it may be 2 or 3 dozen years, right? 20, 30 years before that happens. Yep. Okay, so there it is. And I'm thinking at the end of the day, it comes down to the couple, their decisions, okay? But as long as they're honest with each other and they're discussing the issues and that they know that there is a healthy alternative. Oh, by the way, I also want to say that NFP, an increasing number of couples today are practicing NFP simply from the health reason, from the health perspective. In other words, if this is a method that gives an assurance similar to artificial contraception, but without any of the negative side effects or risks of contraception, specifically the pill, which is the most common one and can be so damaging to the woman's body, right? High blood pressure, etc., clots, you name it. So why not, right? If it gives that insurance, of course, it requires that discipline, right? There's a certain amount of discipline that is required for artificial contraception also, basically to use it properly and to use it consistently. But again, it shifts the focus or the burden because in artificial contraception, typically the bulk of the burden is really on the woman, okay? But this one, in my mind at least, it begins to level the playing field a little bit more, all right? Because now the husband has a responsibility also, which is basically self-restraint, you know? So the couple needs to be creative. If, let's say, if a couple is avoiding having children in that particular time in their marriage, and she's able to determine her time of ovulation, they just need to be creative and find other things to do during that time, which, I keep coming up with other realities about NFP. Let's talk about the timing itself. Before I do that, any other questions or comments anyone wants to make? Okay, so how about the timing? Because I talked about 24 hours as the narrow window, right? What would be a good diagram? We can start here. Ignore the AI thing. The narrow window is 24 hours, the window of opportunity for fertilization. I'm saying narrow, but what happens? Because sperm is able to live inside the female tract for up to 5 days, therefore, they could have intercourse, let's say on day 1, and if she's not ovulating until day 5, she could still get pregnant, right? 5 days after the intercourse. How did that happen? Well, because the sperm was hanging around. So we need to leave at least 5 days a window before the ovulation, okay? And then what many couples do when they're using NFP, just for the sake of simplicity, they add 1 day before and 1 day after that, just like a safety margin, which means 7 days. So it's a week, all right? In other words, what I'm trying to say is that when a couple is using NFP, the woman will try to determine her time of ovulation, her day of ovulation as accurately as possible, and then frame that within a week. And say, okay, so if we want to avoid children at this time, honey, this week, stay away from me, okay? Now, what happens? They still have 3 other weeks within the month when you don't have to stay away from me. Because if there's no egg, there's no egg to fertilize, all right? So 1 week, stay away. The other 3 weeks, we can talk about it. You follow? Conversely, for the couple who's actually trying to have children and are not getting pregnant, and for example, he's gone through some doctor and says, yes, well, unfortunately, you do have sperm in your semen, but it's a low sperm count, right? What are they going to do? They're going to try to concentrate their intimacy during the week of ovulation, precisely so that he can build up enough sperm and not waste it at other times, right? If they're trying to get pregnant. So NFP can be used either way, clinically, either way, to try to achieve pregnancy or to try to avoid the pregnancy. Follow? All right. Other things about NFP. Again, if you have any questions or comments, just interrupt me. Otherwise, I keep mentioning stuff about it because I've counseled a number of couples who are doing NFP, and these are the things they tell me. Some are Catholic, some are not necessarily Catholic. They just know I'm a bioethicist, so they come and ask me questions or share their experiences. So I can tell you that a number of couples are just using it for the health reasons. Typically what happens, it increases communication a lot between the couple. At the psychological level, they really need to talk to each other about it, you know, and plan to the point that, let's say if he's working or if they're both working, they actually plan their vacations around it, all right? Because when they have the window of opportunity to not get pregnant, which would be the 3 weeks, or to get pregnant, which is the 1 week, they plan the rest of their lives around that and give it priority. So you can see that it really takes that intercourse to a different level, to a very, very different level, really a more serious, intimate level of their lives, of their marriage. And so it increases communication a lot. And the divorce rate today in the US is about 60% more or less, all right, which is really, really challenging to consider that most of the couples who marry today will not die in that marriage, okay? Very challenging, but for the subset of couples who are practicing NFP, even just for health reasons, even if they're not religious, for health reasons, the divorce rate is like maybe 5% or something like that. It's a very low percentage of divorce in that subset because precisely they have such a good communication with each other and have such respect and generosity that they have developed that they tend to stick together, okay? And so that's another advantage of NSP. Another one that does happen when you start asking around, you will see that a number of couples who are practicing NFP, they actually have a larger number of children than the average, which the average for zero population growth, for net zero is 1.7 children. Don't ask me how do you get the 0.7 child, it's an average, but basically that's the average for replacement. It's not actually 2. You would think it's 2 for the couple, but it's not 2. It's 1.7, okay, for the human species. At any rate, couples who are practicing NFP typically have more than 2 children. You say, well, you see, that's an evidence that it's not working. What actually happens, again, these are couples who have been practicing NFP for some time in their lives, all right? At some point, they just relax about the whole thing and say, look, we're actually stable in the marriage. We have a couple, 2, 3, even 4 children. So what? If another one comes, we'll deal with that one too. We'll deal with these 4 other delinquents already. So why not one more delinquent? Okay, bring it on. And so they just relaxed about the relationship and not worry anymore about whether she's ovulating or not. And that's it. Okay, so you do get that with NFP couples. Again, it puts the whole issue of having children, they're not freaked out about having children. They're more relaxed about it, and that's a reality. So their priorities do change. It may mean that they don't change their car every year or every 2 years, or they don't have the latest luxury house, and they don't own a boat, and they don't go traveling to Europe every year, etc. The priorities have changed, but they tend to have a larger number of children. I want to mention that because I want you coming back and say, oh, doctor, look at this. It doesn't really work. Okay, it's just part of the dynamics of the couple, but that's how it ends up working out. Okay, anything else? Wow, actually ahead of time. Well, folks, if you have nothing else for this topic, I have nothing else for it either. Okay, so it's 3:20. We can call it quits here and then regroup this Friday, again, 2 p.m. And we're going to shift then into end-of-life issues. But I'm not totally finalized on that yet, because there are a couple of issues there, ectopic pregnancy and 3-parent embryos specifically. And I haven't decided yet if to do them now or, like this week, or move them to the healthcare section, all right? But stay tuned, look at the canvas. We'll try to make that decision by tonight so that starting tomorrow, you will have the next set of PowerPoints and outlines available on Canvas. All right? All right, well, so thanks again for being present one way or another. And I'm going to, stop the share then. Let me.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All the best. See
Bye-bye.
you Friday.
Bye.
Bye.
See you Friday.
Thanks. Bye-bye.